in our day, we have the zechut of understanding what Megillat Esther is about. We have in this document the revelation for absolute freedom. Absolute freedom. But we must have the consciousness to know, number one, what is the purpose of reading it? Number two, to understand that within this Megillah, we have every combination of the powers of the alphabet that God gave at the splitting of the Red Sea, in which they used then to create a change in the natural laws and order of the universe to that extent that they can split a sea, that today, if we understand these three requirements, to know what the Megillat Esther is about, that we, making use of it, will in our own lives achieve a change if necessary, so that we can also continue to live in a world that may be crumbling all around us. Nevertheless, we can be not the victims, but the survivors. I want to read the Ari to make the connection to the Megillah. And so all of us, whether we understand or do not, the important thing is the reader will be meditating. Just to give you an idea, we have even colored it because it is so concealed. That's why it's called Esther. Esther coming from the word seta, concealment. That's why they call her Esther. Her name was actually Hadassah. It was not Esther. Why did they give a name Esther? Again, to provide us with a clue that we did not pick up for 2,000 years. That we were talking about Megillah, which means revelation, Esther, which means the secrets, the codes. And if you notice how in some words we utilize three different combinations, it is a very complex system that through the benefit of the Ari HaKadosh, who clearly define each and every single concept within the Megillah, so that when we read this Megillah today, we will be revealing the light that is necessary to remove darkness. For wars, illness, financial instability are all forms of darkness, part of the Dark Lord. If we can strike the match, that's all that's necessary. Can you imagine? Instead of going through 2,000 years and continuing into this exile, which means we're surrounded by crime, violence, recessions, etc., that we tonight, if we have no questions of the validity of Purim, that Purim for us was not a miraculous event, but for us Purim was the manifestation, for the first time in history, a people, not one sage like Rabbi Shimon, but the people, all combined to reveal such an enormous, awesome light that what we define as recessions, cancer, and you name it, that we're all familiar with, are all part of that definition called darkness. And if we can generate enough light here this evening, as this light is being generated around the globe this evening, we then can remove, to whatever extent that we have recreated in the entire environment, sufficient light to remove from this environment the darkness that unfortunately becomes stronger each and every single passing day. However, even chas v'shalom, we should not be successful towards changing the whole world, which is possible this evening, and only this evening. At least we shall walk out of this room knowing that our personal destiny will have been altered if it included Satan consciousness, which is darkness. Another significant point worth mentioning is this idea, and which is required to be instilled in our consciousness, because there is nothing more that can prevent illness, that can prevent financial instability, breakdown of relationships, as our own consciousness. If we fall into the trap that all around us there is a recession, depression, there are plagues, illness all around the world, and therefore we are concerned maybe it should and will affect us. If we break down into that doubt that it will affect us, unfortunately, we will upon ourselves all that which is around us. So it is essential that we never lose sight of what we captured this evening. Walk out with it and keep it, retain it, that no matter what goes on all around you, you know in your own mind that what I captured this evening has removed, as it did then for the first time in Persia, will work for us this evening. I also want to read a Zohar, strange as it may sound, which again indicates the awesome power that existed and continues to exist in Persia. Because all of us could have asked the question, why? Why did it happen in Persia? I read now from the Zohar, bringing a verse from an obvious place which deals with the subject matter under discussion, from Daniel at chapter 5. Valzeh Sameach HaMashiach, and he's discussing in this particular section the idea of Mashiach. V'samach Rosh HaYeshiva shenidvaseh b'zeh, and the Rosh Yeshiva, the head of the companions, will rejoice in the fact that this is being explained, this is being brought to the forefront. And the companions, Rabbi Shimon and his companions, were sitting and asking, because in Daniel, which is in Aramaic in this particular section, he's discussing Paris Prisat Malchutecha Be'avir Lemadai Uparas. Speaking about Mashiach, he discusses again Paras Umadai. Paras Umadai, as we will read this evening, refers to Persia. And the idea that Mashiach has to do with Persia, again, finished. History has already made its imprint on mankind here and all over the world, where they understand what the Megillah is about. We'll take advantage of the reading this evening. But what does Persia now have to do with Mashiach? Amalo kachu vadai. Zohar says absolute. Absolute. The idea of Mashiach, again, Mashiach will be bound up with Paras. Going to be bound up again with Persia. Paris Prisat Malchutecha Harasha'a al Yedei Mashiach HaAcher. There will be a war. The Mashiach HaAcher, there'll be two Mashiachs. Without going into the details, Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David. And after all of these preliminaries to the coming of Mashiach, when there will be wars with Mashiach ben Yosef, some say that he may die. Va'achar kach yishlot melech pras v'yichvosh harbei meluchot. That Persia, in the time of Melech HaMashiach, will again take control over the entire world as it once did. The reason that Mordechai, Esther, and Daniel are in Shush or Hamadan, Daniel is in Shush, Why are they there? Because they died there? No. You've got to connect with them. They're not physical human beings that we come and there we are. They're connections. Those connections are mentioned in the Zohar. How do you connect when you go to visit Mordechai and Esther or Daniel? The reason they're there is because they, as Persia, will be dealing with the exile. With the exile. It is that buffer. When used, it is the buffer to keep the negative aspect, the Gehenom, which the source is in that area, the root, the origin of Satan is located in that area. It's like Bavel. Today, Saddam Hussein, they are there. So that if we can connect and tap their energy, because they have connected to the positive side, to the positive energy that must of necessity exist there, so as to create a security shield around Satan, around his wellspring of energy. God has never created evil in the world without an appropriate accompanying magen, without an accompanying shield to secure ourselves. What we are doing this evening is connecting with Mordechai and Esther. We're connecting with Daniel so that we can tap the energy. As I will read from the Zohar, why was his name Mordechai? That was his name. That's the kind of response you'll always get. That was his name. Not so, says the Zohar. Mordechai is a code, just as Esther is a code. And without the revelation of the Zohar and the Ari HaKadosh, we have no access. All we can think about is physical ingenuity, how to escape, how to remain survivors as opposed to being victims, rather than take the initial step forward in creating for us, wherever we're located, wherever we are, to prevent disaster from befalling us. And therefore, tonight, we make that connection because Persia deals with the exile. Persia deals with the exile. In annihilating Satan, we must make those connections. That's what they did. That is exactly the methodology by which they were able to contain Satan and his horde. I read now from the Ari to make our connection to the reading of the Megillah. V'nei shoresh nishmat Mordechai hayta min ha'ara hahi. The Ari discusses what is so special about tonight. What is so special about tomorrow night? Says the Ari. When Purim happened, and this is where we have unfortunately been led astray, unfortunately have not been accessed into definitions. What happened on Yud Daled, the 14th day of Adar and the 15th day of Adar? You mean the event happened, the victory over Haman and his group? No, says the Ari HaKadosh. These events came about, they were an effect of 2 days from the original days of creation, were instilled with the power to create freedom from the inception of the 7 days of creation. What happened in Persia by Esther, Mordechai, and Daniel is they, for the first time, could access into these 2 dates. These 2 dates, Yud Daled and Tet Vav, are dates of freedom. They did not know that on these 2 days, we have an opportunity to connect to a phenomena known as freedom. Along came Mordechai, Daniel, and Esther, and said for the first time, they will be able to take control of their lives. Because on this day, there's a he'ara. ולכן על ידו הייתה תשועת ישראל בזמן ההוא, והוא נרמז בשם מרדכי ממש, שהוא לשון מירה דחיה, the purest of the purest energy, which means Mordechai or Mordachia in Aramaic. That on this day, there was the purest, unadulterated energy flowing into the cosmos, into the universe. Therefore, there appeared a Mordechai to furnish you with a connection to the purest of the purest energy required to overcome all adversity. And when Mordechai tells Esther, if you are not going to intercede, God will help us anyway. Why did he say that? I mean, as if Esther was thinking only about her life. Is that what he thought Esther meant? No. We're not interested in the story. What we are interested in is that Mordechai was saying, these 2 days, he says, Esther, whether you talk to the king or you don't talk to the king, freedom is our assurance. It's there. It's assured because we have already learned the system. That's what he meant. He wasn't admonishing her as if she never expressed the idea that she did not want to intercede or that she was fearful of her own life and therefore did not want to divulge who she was. But on this day, says the Ari, Tavin Malat Mordechai Sha'ala Lebchinat Malchut u'Mishna Lamelech. What does it mean he came up to be a king? Mishna Lamelech. As we learned in our discussion today, a king like Shaul had the power to change all of destiny. Because when Shaul went to battle with the Amalek, Shmuel HaNavi, Samuel the prophet says, Shaul, kill everybody. And he comes back with Agag. And Shmuel HaNavi says, didn't God say destroy everybody? Why are you coming back with the leader of the enemy? He says, I fulfilled God's words. But Shmuel HaNavi had told him, destroy Agag. And he comes back with a chutzpah and says, I followed every word that God had told us to do. What kind of a game was Shaul playing? The answer is that Shaul was a king. And a king, if you reach that degree, that level of consciousness, you can change history. Because Shaul said, since being a prophet, a king, he could see down the line. And he saw that the whole idea of Purim would come about through Haman. Haman was a descendant of Agag. Now, if Shaul destroyed Agag, then he was interfering with the great festivity that would take place known as Purim. And therefore, he was following the wishes of God that had already inserted in this video cassette the story of Purim. Said Shmuel, no. We could have cut and spliced the video right then and there. We didn't have to go through the movements and motions. We could cut out the scene of where they have to fast, and the whole story wasn't necessary. He could have, at that moment, taken control of destiny. This is what Mordechai did for us tonight, that we too can take control of our own destiny. And this will be accomplished. This will be accomplished if, to the extent that you understand what I'm trying to say this evening, we're talking about personal freedom, nothing less and nothing more. Chag Sameach.